Hi, my name is Neil Beck and I was a registered medical practitioner in Perth, Western Australia for 53 years, working first of all in the hospitals, then for many years in the suburbs as a family doctor where in the early days I did everything, and then later it was mainly consultations, home and hospital visits, and for 5 years I had my own addiction clinic because we had a big epidemic of heroin in the late 1990s, and I thought I needed to understand that because so many people were dying and there were so many addicts. The conclusion I came to as a result of all that experience is that the most important things in having a good life are, first of all, mental health. That's mostly having good feelings and sometimes having very good feelings, and having sound thinking and enough good habits and no bad habits. Secondly, enough good relationships. People need people. Enough good relationships. Thirdly, normal or high happy chemistry. We have about 25 chemicals in our brain that make us feel good or feel happy, and they also help our health, make us healthy, because happiness and healthiness go together. The 25 chemicals are over 20 endorphins, which are endogenous morphines, internally produced morphine type chemicals which relieve pain and distress and help us to feel much better. And then there's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin and noradrenaline, which each have their own way of helping to make us feel better. So having high happy chemistry is very important. And then it's very important to have a strong immune system. Our immune system is cells and antibodies and chemicals in every part of our body that fight infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. And the autoimmune system is strengthened by having high or normal levels of endorphins. And the next thing is the habit of smiling. Smiling is so important. And why is that? Well, it means that your happy chemistry is normal or strong, but what we now know is that when we smile or laugh, that causes our brain to produce even more happy chemistry. So the smilers have a much better life than the people who don't smile. Another important thing is to be a good person, fair, honest, decent, good-natured, helpful. And why is that? That's because selfish, nasty people don't have good friends, and good relationships, which are so important, just don't happen if you're if you're a bad person. And the next thing is to have a knowledge of all the serious bad things that have happened in your family going back for 3 generations. And why do you need to do that? It's because uh, bad feelings like anxiety, depression, are passed on to children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. When your grandmother is 5 months pregnant with your mother, so your mother is about a tiny little 1 kilo developing baby in your grandma's tummy, already the egg that's going to become you is in that 1 kilo mother's ovary. So any stress chemicals that your grandmother has because of bad things happening to her, or that your mother has at any stage up until you're born, affects you. And it's the same with your father's sperm. The sperm is affected, which affects the sperm that becomes you with your mother's egg is affected by things that happen, bad things that happen to your father, your grandfather, or your great-grandfather. So that's very important. And the last very important thing is no addictions. Addictions are such a disaster, and addictions arise because of problems with those other things. If you're mentally unhealthy, you had bad relationships, you have low happy chemistry, then that's what drives people to they get mental disorders, and then if the mental disorders aren't diagnosed and treated properly, which they often aren't, they get street treatment, and the street treatment's always addictive, and then they end up as addicts. And sadly, mental health is such a big problem. Now in Australia, 38% of family doctor consultations are about mental health. So that's very common. 38% of family doctor consultations. And what I saw was that so many people who needed help were not getting help, and those who were getting help very often, almost always, were not getting enough help. And one of the big problems was what I call blind spots, except they weren't just blind spots, they are blind zones in mental health work. And there were 7 of them, 7 blind zones, which made the mental health work not very effective. So more of it was needed because it was ineffective, and there were never going to be enough mental health workers to do all that needed to be done. So what were the 7 blind spots? The biggest blind spot, I think the biggest anyway, is not realizing that mental health is mainly about habits. Anxiety is a bad habit. Depression, to some extent, is a bad habit. So many mental health problems are bad habits. And every one of us should understand what habits are, how habits are formed, how you can make good habits and how you can break bad habits. And yet I never heard any mental health worker talking about habits. So how do you get a habit? Well, everything that happens to you or that you do happens because of electrical and chemical triggers and messages. If I move my hand like that, that's because a message is passed down a nerve to the muscles in my arm. Everything that happens in us and everything we do is the result of electrical messages, usually flowing from our brain along nerves. There are nerves connected to our brain in every smallest part of our body, and just as there is a blood flow in every part of our body, if there's no blood in a part of your body, it gets no oxygen, it dies. So what happens is that anything that we do often, those messages, electrical and chemical messages and triggers, get stronger and stronger and stronger. The more often you do something, the stronger the triggers get, the stronger the messages get, and if you do enough of it, they become almost automatic, take very little to trigger, and are hard to stop. And that's what a habit is. And 60 to 65% of our life is habits. And why is that? It's because our brain is so busy that what it has to do is to focus on the things, focus conscious awareness on the things that are very difficult, the things that don't happen very often, and the things that are new. And it doesn't have time for everything, so anything that happens over and over and over the same, it just makes those messages and triggers stronger and stronger and stronger till they're automatic. So your brain doesn't have to do any work, those things just happen. Like driving a car. The first time when you're having driving lessons, you have to think about everything and you consciously do it. But when you've been driving a car for 10 years, you can drive from here to 200 miles away without thinking about it. Well, once thinking about putting your foot on the brake or the accelerator, it's all habits. So it's very important for every person to understand how you make habits and how you can break harmful habits. And we have to have enough, plenty of good habits, and we need to preferably have no bad habits. And you make good habits by doing things over and over and over again. And some things that we want to make habits, like perhaps exercise, we're not that keen about. So what you have to do is you have to make the new habit, you have to talk about it and think about it, and maybe do a ChatGPT or a Google search on it and become quite sure that your life is going to be better if you make that habit. So you get very sure that you want the habit, and then you make it as convenient as possible, as quick and easy and simple as possible, and do it often. And you make it enjoyable. Make it enjoyable. And if it's not very enjoyable, well, you have a lovely taste of something each time you do it. You reward yourself with something nice. and preferably not with sugar and calories in it. We are developing some new pocket dispensers that contain tasty fruit powder and that you can have in your pocket, and you reward yourself with something nice every time you do the habit, and then you'll do it more often. You look forward to it, and then it'll become a habit quicker. And how can you break habits? Just the opposite. The less you do them, the weaker they get. So what you do to break a habit is you first of all think about it, talk to people about it, maybe do a ChatGPT or a Google search, and become sure that your life is going to be better, and perhaps the lives of people who are important to you is going to be better if you break that habit. And once you're very sure you want to break that habit, then you make it as inconvenient as possible and difficult to do and unpleasant. If you want to stop smoking, don't have the cigarettes in your pocket. Leave them out the back somewhere, so every time you want a cigarette you've got to go and get one, only get one, and anything you can do to delay, delaying doing the habit, and then if possible doing less of it. So with the cigarettes, you not only leave them in some awkward place where you've got to go and get one to smoke, but when you're 3/4 smoked it, throw the rest away. So do a bit less, and that will weaken the habit, and then it's easier to delay it and to do less of it again. And it gets easier and easier to delay and do less until eventually you can quit it. And what are some of the other ways you can delay it? I like to use the word quick switching. Quick switching. Quick switching is you make some other habits to help you break the habit that you don't want. And as soon as you start to think about doing the habit that you want to do but you don't want to do it, you quick switch to doing something else. For instance, in the case of the tasty fruit powder, you keep dropping the tasty powder on your tongue and focusing on that. And while you're focusing on that, you can delay doing the harmful habit, and delaying it weakens it. If you want to break a habit, think of things that you can do instead of that. What can you do to break the habit? You can make new habits to break the bad habits. New habit like lovely tasting fruit powder, or some music, or look at some pictures or some photos that you love, or just anything that you love that you can make into a habit and switch to it as soon as you think of doing the thing that you don't want to do, the habit that you want to break. Habits are so important, and yet I never hear mental health workers talking about habits. Every one of us should become very aware of habits, and how important they are in our life, and be able to know how to make new habits and how to break habits that are harmful. And I would particularly like to recommend this book. Atomic Habits by Dr. James Clear. I've read it about 5 times, and it's the best book on habits I could find. There's another book by Charles Duhigg, which is pretty good, but I think this one is better. And there are a couple of others I bought that were useless. I just had to throw in the bin. Habits, very important. Quick switching. Another habit you use to break the bad habit. The second blind area, which is so important, is to realize that the earlier you start to fix a mental health problem, the quicker and easier it is, and the less work and time and cost is going to be involved. So if something bad happens to you and you have a nasty reaction to it, fix it as soon as possible. Get help as soon as possible if you need help, or whatever else. Download our Mental Fix-It app and do its check, and watch the videos, 100-minute videos it recommends will help with that, for that particular problem that you've got. But early is so important. And what's very important is for you to work out what you want, need to get, and what you need to get rid of. It's all very well to be told that you've got ADHD and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or you've got bipolar disorder, or you've got post-traumatic stress disorder. But really what you want to know is, what do you want to get? What do you want to get rid of? With ADD, what you want to get is the ability to focus and concentrate well, the ability to make good decisions and not be impulsive and make wrong decisions, and to not be hyperactive. That's what you want. So how do you get what you want? Knowing, getting clear what you want or need is makes it much more likely that you'll get it. Because anything that happens that you notice, you'll notice if that's going to help you, or you'll notice if it's going to make you worse. So being very clear about what you want and need, and noticing anything and everything that helps it or that hinders it. I think we need to have diagnoses, and there are about 9 or 10 common ones that I saw a lot of. The DSM-5 book on mental health says there's about 500, but it's really mainly anxiety, worry disorders, major depression, bipolar disorder, sleep disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, irritability, anger disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic evil focus, very low self-esteem, schizophrenia, and autism. There's about 10, and most people, nearly everyone who's got one of those things has got at least 2 or 3 of them. So if you have a problem, start to get it fixed early. Find out, get very clear what you want or need and what you want to get rid of. Uh, Another blind area in mental health is that so often the causes aren't looked for. Everything that happens has a cause. Nothing happens without being caused. If you've got depression, or you've got anxiety, or you've got ADD, or you've got whatever, there was cause or causes. Sometimes, say, as with anxiety, that might have been 2 or 3 different causes. One thing started it, another thing made it worse, and something else made it even worse. But if I don't know what caused a person's problem, it's much harder for me to help them to get better. So I always try to find the causes. Now sometimes you can't do anything about the causes. It was things that happened a long time ago, but when you understand the causes, it's easier to help people to come to terms with it. If they know why something bad happened to them, it'll be less bad for them than if they don't know why it happened. For instance, often it's because someone hurt them or neglected them, but almost always a parent who hurts or neglects their child does that because they were hurt and neglected. I had a grandmother that I thought was a bitch. I thought that because of the way she treated me very badly when I was a small child. And eventually, when I did a ChatGPT search on the family and found that her mother had 9 children by 3 different husbands, and that my grandmother was born when her mother was 24, and from the age of 16 to 22 she had had 4 sons. And there was a lot of other bad stuff. And my grandmother would have been like a second mother in that family, and she was subject to great stress. And when I realized all that and I thought about it, and my grandmother's children were wonderful, and you don't have wonderful children unless you're a good mother. And so now the grandmother I thought was a bitch, I now think she's a hero. I'm just amazed that she managed to survive all that she survived and to do so well with her own children. When her mother had 9 children, 3 different husbands, and her mother died when she was 42 from cancer, when my grandmother was only 18, and she would have not only been the second mother, she was the nurse for her dying mother as well, because that was in the back blocks of South Australia when healthcare wasn't very good. Causes, understanding causes is very important. It helps you to get people better, and it stops them from relapsing. If you don't know the cause, but you manage to help someone to get better, but the cause is still there, why aren't they going to relapse? Well, so often they do relapse. So causes are very important, and that seems to be a blind spot. And if you've got a problem and the healthcare looking after you doesn't find the cause, well, you tell them you want to know what the cause is. And another blind spot is we treat people as if they're solo, as if they live alone. And none of them live alone. They all live with other people, and mostly, in the most important years, they lived in a family. And nearly all mental health problems and addiction problems are family problems. And if you try to get a troubled person better and nothing changes in the family, it's much, much harder. So treating people with mental health and addiction problems as if they're solo is a blind area and a big cause of weakness of mental health care, and one of the reasons why there'll never be enough mental health carers to do all the work that needs to be done. And another blind area is transgenerational trauma. Until recently, and still very widely, people think, and a lot of mental health carers think, that everything just happened in this generation. Didn't. Almost, or a lot of the major problems are the result of bad things that happened to the previous generation and their generation and their generation before them. Happened to your mother or your father, or happened to their mother or father, or happened to their mother's or father's mother or father. If very bad things that happen to people, bad sicknesses, bad accidents, marriage breakdowns, unemployment, bankruptcy, bad things change a person's chemistry. We produce cortisol and adrenaline, which are stress chemicals, and those stress chemicals affect everything that's in us. And the egg that's going to become you or me is already inside your mother before she's born, while she's inside her grandmother. So the bad things that happen to the grandmother and to the mother affect our genes and our chemistry. They don't change what genes we've got. What genes we've got is fixed, but some are switched on and some are switched off. And these stress hormones switch things off and on, and that's how drastic things that happen to our great-grandmother or our grandmother or our mother can switch genes on and off, on or off in us, and affect our functioning. So transgenerational trauma is very important, and I now wouldn't try to help a seriously troubled person with anxiety or depression or panic attacks or post-traumatic stress disorder or irritability, any of those things, without at least spending a little time finding out about the lives of their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. And sometimes terrible things happen which nobody talks of, nobody speaks about, so you have to do a bit of digging. But Yeah. And another blind spot is self-help. It's so important that we teach people to help themselves. And we don't, that seems to be a blind spot in a lot of mental health care. People care for troubled people, but don't help troubled people to learn how to help themselves. And self-help is so important, and that requires tools and teaching. And the problem with mental health and addiction is that there are only two tools, and they've both got very big problems. One tool is medicine, and that's got the problem that so many medicines are addictive. Nearly all the anxiety, worry medicines and sleep medicines are addictive. And the three main medicines for ADD, Ritalin, dexamphetamine, Adderall, are addictive. So addictiveness is a major weakness with the tool of medicines. And the other is slowness. When you swallow a tablet or a capsule, it takes half an hour to an hour to go right down your gut and start to be absorbed into your bloodstream and go to wherever it's needed in your body. And 1 to 2 hours, so half an hour to an hour to start to work, and 1 to 2 hours before it's working strongly. And that's just too slow for many mental health distresses and addiction cravings. And the other tool is talk therapy, and it's got two big weaknesses. Counseling, psychotherapy, group therapy, whatever, is slow. With a new patient with problems, you really need an hour to discover everything, what's wrong, how it started, what caused it, what's making it worse, and what's going to make it better. And an hour is just a long time. And so many people don't get an hour, they get half an hour or 20 minutes. Sadly, sometimes they only get 5 or 10 minutes and get given a prescription and don't have any talk therapy. And the other weakness with talk therapy is it's costly, because to be a therapist you have to have at least a 4-year psychology degree from a university, and a lot of psychologists have got a 6 or 7 year PhD degree, and the psychiatrists, they have to have a 6-year general medical degree, and then a couple of years general medical experience, and then 3, 4, 5 years of psychiatric training, so 10 or 12 years. And anyone who's intelligent enough to train as a therapist and puts all that time in is going to be expensive. They have to be paid well. They deserve to be paid well. If we don't pay them well, there'll be even less of them. So it's expensive. Not even governments can afford to pay for all the clinics that would be needed to do everything. There's a disaster going on in New South Wales and Sydney at the moment, where so many free government clinic psychiatrists are resigning because they're not being paid well enough, and because their work is unbearable. They're so busy and they're only half treating people, and it's so unsatisfactory. And often in those situations people get hostile, and sometimes mental health and addiction carers are assaulted. So Um, I think that's enough for today. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm under a great deal of pressure. I'm working on 3 new tools that I think are going to be wonderful, but they're a lot of work, and I'll tell you about them when the time comes. But now I have to cut back a bit on my live streaming. So, but please, I want to hear your questions, your comments, and even your criticisms. Please send them to me through the platform that you watch the live streaming on, or through our email for that. Our email for that is healthestuff@gmail.com. healthestuff@gmail.com, spelt how it sounds. And if you can't remember it, just look it up on our website, smilefixit.com. Smilefixit.com. You can find the email address there. And I always, in the evening after doing the live streaming, which I do on Wednesday, Friday and Saturday evenings at 7 p.m. and on Sundays at 9 a.m. Perth time, which is 9 p.m. Sydney and Melbourne time, and some ungodly hour in the Northern Hemisphere, which is why I switched from doing the Sunday session in the evening to the morning, because Perth 9 a.m. is a better user-friendly hour time in the Northern Hemisphere. Okay, hope to hear from you. Bye.